Hello, and welcome to this week's Ethical Dilemma in Science. We're going to take a look at bionic eyes, especially as related to patients with medical implants, which are based on abandoned or obsolete technology. So, again, the premise of many of these ethical dilemmas in science is based on recent news, and this one is no different. This is an article that came out relatively recently, I guess a couple months ago now. Their bionic eyes are now obsolete and unsupported. And so these are individuals that are among about 350 people worldwide that are using this implant, this retinal implant, that allows them to have limited eyesight. This is a process, a technology that was first approved in the European Union in 2011 and approved in the United States in 2013. And so these are patients that basically have damage to their eyes, a late stage degenerative eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa, in which the cells that normally respond to light end up dying, they're damaged, but the rest of the visual system is going to be intact. And so they're going to use an implant to kind of stimulate the nerves, stimulate the visual process in order to elicit a limited amount of vision associated with that. Now, this company, really amazing technology, but it was on the verge of going bankrupt in 2020. And so they stated that they're no longer going to be repairing the implants, and they've got a limited number of the external components for replacements. Now, 2 years ago, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Now they're going into a merger with another company, but it's unclear whether or not they're going to be focusing on continual development and support of these retinal implants. So to start out with, trying to understand a little bit of the science involved with the visual system. And so this is a review article from 2020 in Clinical Neurophysiology, where we're basically seeing kind of the visual system, kind of at least the start of the visual system. And so we've got the eye here, and so basically the eye, as we know, is involved with vision and is involved with sight. But what happens is that the eye is basically kind of evolved and developed into this specialized structure that's able to convert some type of external object, a visual representation or image of an external object, into a basically image that is projected onto the back of the eye. And within the back of the eye is going to be the retina, and this is where we're going to have cells that are specialized nerve cells that are able to convert the kind of light signals that are coming from this image into electrical signals. And so you basically have, if you've heard about the term rods and cones, these are rods and cones are photoreceptors. They are going to be specialized sensory neurons that are capable of responding to light signals. And so when light shines on them, the visual image coming in through the lens, through the pupil, kind of focused on the back of the eye, this is going to convert that light into a neuronal signal that's going to go out through the back of the eye, through the optic nerve, into the back portion of the brain where the visual cortex is going to be located. And so it's this back portion of the brain kind of sitting, make sure I turn in the right direction, kind of this region right here, kind of underneath the skull. It's going to be the region that is involved with visual perception, kind of converting these neuronal signals into our representation and our understanding, in this case, of what a tree looks like. And so if we're taking a look at these retinal implants, we're looking at these in essence bionic eyes. What we're looking at is kind of, this is that back region of the eye. So you've got the eyeball located up here. We've got the retina that's located in the back, and we've got this kind of higher resolution kind of artist rendition of it, where we can see these are the cells here, the photoreceptors. These are going to be the rods in the cone, so that when light shines on that, it's going to activate these cells, and it's going to send a signal kind of out through that optic nerve to the brain, and it's going to be interpreted as vision. And so what happens is these rods and cones become damaged in retinitis pigmentosa, and so that basically they are no longer able to respond to the light signals. But the rest of the retina is intact. The rest of the retina is healthy and capable of sending signals if the signals are initiated in some way. And so the technology associated with this bionic eye is that we're going to have a little camera that's going to be located on the equivalent of glasses here that are going to project forward and take a look at, kind of what the person would be looking, or at least their face is going to be looking at. If their eyes were functional, what their eyes would be seeing. And so what happens, that camera is going to go through kind of a little computer system. So we're looking at the equivalent of a brain-computer interface that we're going to talk about in a variety of these ethical dilemmas in science, and basically kind of converts that kind of visual signal captured by the camera into a signal that is going to be sent into the intraocular implant, into this implant, this retinal implant illustrated over here, which is basically kind of inserted into the retina. And this basically a lot of times, this is going to convert that visual image that has gone through the little computer processor and then stimulate regions of the retina. And by stimulating regions of the retina, it's going to activate kind of the cells that would be involved with sending the signals through the visual system, sending it to the brain, which is going to analyze that. And so we're basically bypassing these damaged photoreceptors here and kind of artificially stimulating the retina to induce an image that would be occurring. And so, it's great technology, amazing technology that provides limited eyesight for these individuals that would be kind of effectively blind without that. But it's dependent upon having this receptor, this retinal implant, that is kind of embedded and implanted into the back of the eye. So they have to go into a surgical procedure and have this implanted, and then the individual has to learn how to interpret those visual images that are coming through it. Now, keep in mind, we're not talking about the equivalent of the $6 Million Man, the 1970s television show, where you've got this kind of enhanced supervision, in essence. What we're looking at with these implants, depending upon what their resolution is instead of total blindness, they may be able to look at an image, in this case, an image of a woman in a hat, and then based on the pattern of those retinal implants, again, these retinal implants here, activating based on the light images that are coming in through the camera system going through the computer, that's going to give it into kind of a series of kind of activations, almost a series of pixels that would be activated in the retina of the eye. And so if it's a very crude setting, you're going to see kind of big splotches that are going to be appearing. And as it gets finer and finer in resolution, you're going to get to the point where you've got kind of a fuzzy image, or then at a higher resolution, you're going to see, like the equivalent of that. At this point, the technology is relatively limited. So, they're not seeing a nice, crisp image of the woman, but they are seeing kind of objects around them. And so they have, not, 20/20 vision, but they have the ability to see things that are in their environment and have, kind of a little bit of improvement from being completely blind. And so again, amazing technology that is important. But in this case, we're looking at a situation where the implant is surgically inserted into the retina, and it's a company that may no longer exist, or at least a company that is abandoning this technology and no longer supporting it. So what are the patients going to do when they are faced with a situation where they need something to be repaired, or they need additional support? That becomes a big question. Do they undergo another surgery to have the implant removed? Or do they leave the implant in place and then have problems? Individuals with one of these retinal implants is going to have difficulty in like a magnetic resonance imaging, an MRI process. Again, because of that implant, it's going to have potentially be affected by the magnetic waves associated with the MRI imaging. Now, we're using this as an example, taking a look at the Bionic Eye and the concerns raised by concerns associated with that company, initially going into bankruptcy, but now kind of going through a merger, but not necessarily clear whether or not they're going to continue working on this technology. There are other types of brain implants as well, other types of medical implants that are found within modern medical technology. Now, an example of this, this is looking at a CT scan of a an individual. And so this is looking kind of from the side. And so you got the nose here, the kind of skull around the outside. This is looking kind of from the front. And so you can see the eyes here, again, the nasal cavity here, and then the skull. Now, in this case, what we've got is an individual that has this little device that's been inserted, basically an electrode that's going to go into a region of the brain. And it's going to have, again, some sensors, a little computer device that's going to be present here, batteries associated with it as well. But this is an implant that is used for forms of epilepsy that are difficult to treat under normal circumstances. And so this implant system, another brain-computer interface, is designed so that it kind of senses when an individual is about to have an epileptic seizure and kind of activates this electrode and causes an electrical stimulation pattern that kind of blocks the development of the seizure. So for individuals that, the medication is not working for them, that are subject to lots and lots of epileptic seizures, in many cases, many times a day, this is a great advance because it controls the kind of number and extent of the seizures that are occurring. Another example of this is deep brain stimulation associated with Parkinson's disease. Again, this idea that we're going to be implanting in a series of electrodes that go into the brain and the activity, kind of, again, a stimulator located here, in this case, kind of underneath the shoulder, electrical wires that are going to go through to the implants. We're looking at the possibility of improving motor performance, and by improving motor performance, basically their ability to move around on their own is a dramatic effect, a dramatic improvement for patients with Parkinson's disease. But again, we've got a technology that needs to be implanted in, ideally implanted in for the lifetime of the individual, and you want that to be supportive. You want this to be working for an extended period of time. What happens in the future if one of these companies, no longer follows up on this technology, maybe moves on to a different technology or different kind of process, or in the case of the manufacturer of the Bionic Eyes, goes out of business? What happens then for those individuals that have become dependent upon the ability to treat their condition with some of these medical implants? And so that gives rise to the question associated with this week's ethical dilemma in science. We're looking at it in the form of the Bionic Eyes stories that, and additional information will be in the links below. But there are all kinds of other types of medical implants that need to be kind of thought of. What happens for these individuals that are dependent upon this for their quality of life if something happens to the manufacturer? So the question then becomes, how should patients with implanted medical devices be protected against obsolescence? It's one thing if your iPhone, breaks or the technology is no longer supported. You go and you get a new iPhone. But what do you do if you've got this surgical implant that is located, embedded within your body, that is no longer doing what it needs to do and is no longer being supported? What role, if any, should regulators such as the Food and Drug Administration play in protecting patients from abandoned devices? If a company stops producing an implanted medical device, should their proprietary patents be released to open source? Should the information involved with building this technology be available so that, the equivalent of do it yourself, or potentially kind of open source in that other companies could potentially bring up kind of advancements in this, or at least support the technology that's embedded in somebody's body. And then finally, should implantable device manufacturers, these implanted medical devices, contribute to some type of trust fund or insurance plan to financially support patients if their technology, if their device is abandoned? And so, for those patients that have these bionic eyes, these retinal implants, they potentially have to go through another surgery to have that removed if it's no longer working and no longer has an effect and causing problems, especially if they have to do an MRI. If the company's no longer available, that then is a cost that is borne by the individuals that have this. So thank you for listening to this week's Ethical Dilemma in Science. Please see the description below for additional information and references. I've got a variety of other news accounts, a couple scientific articles associated with this technology. Thank you, and have a great week.